Let's talk about herbs. I mean, why not? I love herbs. They're one of the easier things to grow, so I thought I'd make a video where I talk about all the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years about growing herbs. I remember one time I took a class on how to grow herbs in containers, and when I showed up, it was a bunch of ladies in their like 60s and 70s, and I'm like, yes, these are my people. I am in the right place. I always know I'm in the right place, if that's the demographic, like if I'm at a crafts fair or something. So I'm starting here with thyme. Thyme thrives really well in well-drained soil. So when you're potting it, use a mix that is light, it's airy, like a cactus mix. Most potting soils are like this already, so I wouldn't say you have to really worry about it. It's a pretty hardy herb. It still needs a little care, so water it sparingly. Let the top of the soil kind of dry out before you water it next. A tip that I use for literally all of my plants is I pick one day of the week. I go around, I look at all the plants, I say, does the soil look wet or not? And if it looks wet, I don't water it. I just let it ride another week. And if it looks dry, I water it. It doesn't work well with all plants, but it works well enough where it'll get you to the point where you're not killing your plants. Harvesting tip, I always just take a couple inches off the top. I use it when I need it. You can do some cool stuff like hanging it to dry, but we'll get there at the end of the video here. Another herb, everyone loves this herb. Well, I won't say everyone loves this herb, right? Because you talk to people about cilantro, and you're gonna get like 50% of people who are gonna immediately tell you, oh, I don't like cilantro, it tastes like soap. And I feel really bad for those people, because cilantro is awesome. Cilantro likes to be spread out. It likes a pot that's a little deep, so at least 8 to 10 inches. Really, when growing in containers though, I really don't worry about the size so much. I just use what I have. So you can see here I'm using an old milk jug. I think it's awesome to do things like this to be sustainable, and I'm only growing a pretty small plant here, so it should be fine. I give my plants a little shake when I pot them like that, so it gets the soil distributed easily, evenly, and kind of in those spots that you can't get to. Cilantro can be a little finicky, so if you're growing it outside, do it when it's cooler in temps, spring or fall, but indoors, anytime. When you harvest it, you kind of harvest it towards the base. Basil. Everybody loves basil. Everybody loves basil. It's like one of those plants that you just bring up, like, oh, you're growing basil, and everyone's like, that's the one thing I can grow. I made a video about how to pinch your basil. It's a shorter one, and I recommend going back and watching that, because you'll really get more bang for your buck for your basil. It shows how to prolong the life perpetually with basil as well. Something that you can do with your containers that I'm demonstrating here is I put some rocks at the bottom. So this already had holes at the bottom, so it wasn't quite necessary, but I just wanted to demonstrate this. The reason why I did this, right? So if you didn't have holes in the bottom of your container and you water it too much, the water is going to form a pool at the bottom of the container, and the plant's roots will sit in it and it will rot the plant. If you make a little bed of rocks at the bottom, it creates a gap, a space where that water goes, and then the plant sits on top of the rocks. So instead of rotting the plant's roots, it never gets to that point because you made that extra layer as kind of a barrier for yourself. Basil loves warm weather, lots of sunlight, so if you're in the Midwest like me, give it as much sunlight as you can. When potting it in a container, you want about 8 inches deep, good drainage, as I said. Water it regularly. It likes kind of moist soil, but not waterlogged soil. You can start harvesting basil when it's about 6 to 8 inches tall. Simply snip off leaves as you need it, or right above 2 base nodes. Again, I recommend going back and watching that video I made about pinching basil. That'll make more sense. It's incredibly versatile in the kitchen. It's perfect for adding, just that little touch after the dish. You can just lay it on top of the dish. Great for pestos. Simple blend of basil, garlic, pine nuts, Parmesan cheese, maybe some olive oil. When cooking with basil, it's best to add it at the end of the cooking process. That kind of preserves its bright flavor, its vibrant color, And don't forget, there are many different varieties of basil. Rosemary. Let's talk about rosemary. Rosemary is a Mediterranean herb, right? So you kind of need to mimic that environment. Lots of sunlight. Choose a container that's about 12 inches deep. Again, with containers, I'm not too concerned about them. Just use what you have. A light, well-draining soil mix, that's kind of a common thing throughout most of the herbs. That's what you want to use. It's relatively low maintenance, does need some conditions. Water it thoroughly. Let the soil dry out in between waterings. Doesn't like to be overwatered. Prune it regularly so when it gets bushy, just kind of take some off the top. It can be harvested year-round. Best time to do it, people say, is in the morning. I just use it when I need it. You can dry it out. You can add it to your olive oil, which you'll see. It also looks a lot like lavender. I won't really touch on lavender a whole lot. I recommend growing lavender outside, but they look very similar at least up until the flowering point. When I first water my herbs in containers, I like to water it until I see the water drain out the bottom. And I do that so I can see that the drainage is well enough. Obviously, this is in cases where there are holes at the bottom of the container. I don't do this if there's just rocks or something, because I'm not trying to waterlog it from the beginning. So you can see how I pinch the basil right above two little nodes there. Thyme, it can be harvested, whenever, when it has plenty of growth, really. So sometimes this can take up to 6 to 8 weeks. Snip off the sprigs as you need, cutting just a pair above the leaves there. It encourages plant growth. You can harvest thyme throughout the season. The more you trim, the bushier the plant will become. So something you can do to preserve thyme, just put a little water in the bottom of a mason jar and drop your thyme right in from where you cut. Put that in the fridge and it'll last a little longer. Some people like to dry out their thyme. So you can tie it with a string right through the middle and then hang that in a dark, well-vented place. If you don't want to do it this way, you can just kind of set it out on a dryer sheet and again just put it in a dark, dry, well-vented place. I tend to just cut it when I need it and throw it into my dish with some butter, and that works really well. Cilantro, you can start harvesting it when it's about 6 inches tall. There's not a whole lot of cilantro here on this plant, so I'm just kind of doing it for demonstration purpose. You want to cut the stems as close as you can to the ground while leaving the central stem in place, so then it continues to grow. People say you want to harvest in the morning. Again, I just harvest when I need it. If you allow the plant to flower, you can always consider just using the seeds afterwards. Rosemary, again, people say the best time to harvest it's in the morning. Really, the best time is when it's dry out. So if you're growing this inside, this isn't really something you need to take into consideration. You can harvest it whenever. You can snip off the sprigs as you need, cutting just above a leaf. Again, that always promotes growth. Regular harvesting will make the plant bushier. It'll also prevent it from becoming too woody. Rosemary can be used fresh or dried, just like thyme. I like to put it directly in my olive oil. Now, when using thyme, you can see what I just did there. If you hold it and slide your fingers along the stem, you'll pull off all the leaves perfectly. It just comes right off. And you can see that you just have the stem and the thyme, and then you can just toss in the leaves. But you don't have to, you can toss in the stem, but just remember to take that out afterwards. I like to put my rosemary in my olive oil. It does add a little flavor of rosemary to the olive oil. Now, the best thing about herbs, right, is it just adds that little bit of extra flavor to your cooking. You can easily have them in your kitchen, in your house, and so you can take them as you need it. When people see you cut a little herbs or put some on your dish, all of a sudden everyone thinks you're like Gordon Ramsay. Some herbs I didn't touch on, chives. I do have chives growing outside, different varieties of basil you can see. When you harvest chives, do it just like cilantro, harvest it at the base. And if you don't harvest your herbs continuously, they go to flower. So when a plant goes to flower, it flowers, drops seeds, and then it dies, right? But don't feel bad if you do that, because you're helping nature. Bugs love those flowers. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, just a quick one about herbs, and yeah, I'll make many more in the future. So like, subscribe, and I appreciate you so much for being here. Thank you.